Eminences, dear fathers, dear colleagues, the topic I will discuss during our conference is Canons of the Church and State Legal Order. I must admit that that was the works of the Divine Providence, because actually this could have very well been the title of another conference that will follow at some point in time, in which, with your blessing, Your Eminence, and with the permission of the Director of the Academy, will take place, jointly organized with the newly founded society. Because there's so many issues involved here that even some introductory remarks on this topic, I need at least 20 minutes just to comment on the title. So anyway, I will be brief, spot on, by referring to some other brilliant presentations that we heard these days. So, canons of the Church. What are these canons today from my viewpoint of the legal expert? Father Grigorios Papathomas has been so kind to give me his presentation. He set the issue of the Corpus Canonum, these 770 canons, but is that all? How about the more recent constitutional canonical texts that the Church and the Fathers have accepted? Aren't these also canons in our view? Well, I'm raising questions here. I do not pretend to be able to provide answers. I'm not a member of the Church. I'm not even, of course, a bishop. So, or is it something wider, which goes beyond the Corpus Canonum of the 770 canons? So in my view, when we say Church canons, and by the way, you have the poster of the conference in front of you. In Greek it's Kanones της Εκκλησίας. In English it is Orthodox Canonical Tradition. There's no coincidence. There is a substantive difference between the Greek and the English title. So, in my view, canons are the wider canonical tradition. Now, in order to set the stage, what is state legal order of today? Of course, I'm not going to refer to the Byzantine era. Is it the Greek legal order? Is it the legal order of all Orthodox churches? My dear friend Pantelis Kalagidis will discuss this. That is, how about the legal orders in other Orthodox states, which is something totally different compared to the Greek legal order. Even more so, all these legal orders dynamically change. Not to mention that Orthodox churches are not aware of the reality next door. When I try to explore what happens in Bulgaria or Romania, wherever, it is difficult to find the sources. In order to study this subject, you need to know the prevailing law and the legal order in this or that country. In Bulgaria, in this case, before or while studying the Bulgarian church. So there are multiple levels to be explored. So what is, the other question is, what is a legal order, a state legal order? So let me try to limit the discussion on the Greek legal order, because by definition I'm not in a position to discuss other states' legal orders. So, as theologians say, let's start from God. In other words, let's start from the Constitution if we want to deal with the legal order. The Constitution says firm obeyance of the apostolic tradition, etc., etc. Even as early as 1964. The late Professor Amilkas Elivizatos had observed that there's something missing here. The patristic canons, and in the Iranian for Maridakis. This is a volume dedicated to Maridakis, an international expert. So, in this volume, he writes, as early as 1964, that the necessary amendments of the first two articles of the Constitution of the Hellenic Republic. However, the leadership of the Church systematically refuses to discuss any amendment of the articles of the Constitution, although they might be in their benefit. That I really do not understand. In the Canonical review, in the present issue, I wonder what prevents us from abolishing Article 105, providing for the self-governance of Mount Athos. This article can very well be reviewed. Actually, it would be up to the Church to take the initiative and say, listen, there are some constitutional provisions that can be amended and improved. Then we have Article 3 of the Greek Constitution as amended after 1975. This made things worse because in the relations with the Ecumenical Patriarchate, it created problems, and then these problems were exacerbated because of the reference that the Greek Church is governed by the Synod, etc., as defined in the Patriarchal volume, etc., etc. This created huge problems in jurisprudence. So where does this apply to? To the whole volume, all the acts, or just the composition of the Permanent Holy Synod? In order to avoid the ex officio appointment of members of the Synod. The late colleague, Papastathis, also used the term quasi-permanent synod. And then we had the problems at the Council of the State in order to decide on the decisions of the Church. Is this to the benefit of the Church? No. Does this wording serve the interests of the Church? No, in my view. Therefore, this is what I had said to the current prelate and the previous one. I've talked to the last three prelates of the Greek Church. I told them, let the Greek Church decide and let them set up a think tank for the purpose of a brainstorming, and then let the Archbishop keep these, and the Holy Synod keep these for themselves. Maybe something good will come out of this brainstorming. I don't see why the Church always tries to come up later after something has happened to take care of negative implications. The Church should be more proactive. Then, the Council of the State and the enshrinement of the Church canons in the Constitution and Greek law. I have discussed this in my book. So it's not just about Article 3 of the Constitution, it is Article 13 of the Greek Constitution, which enshrines and protects religious freedom for all religious communities. Therefore, it provides adequate safeguards for the prevailing religion, of course, which means that Article 13 also safeguards the self-government of religious communities. The self-administration, and of course all the bylaws, the internal laws. The legislator, on the request of the Church, has assigned canonical powers to the Church to issue canonical acts, because the Church, as well as the State, have primary power of issuing legal acts. Well, as a legal person, personally, I understand these as regulatory binding texts. And Father Grigorius This is the difference here, the access. I'm a legal person. The theologian sees everything from the point of view of the expert on canons. Anyway, the Church, and this is the most important thing, has primary authority to issue regulations. The state is the same. The state is concerned with the citizens and the Church with the faithful. The only difference, therefore, is the Catholical character, that is, the binding character. The rules of the state apply to all those who communicate with the state, that is, all the citizens, all those who live in the state at a certain point in time, while the canons of the Church only apply to the faithful of the specific religious community. How much time? How many minutes do I have? Excellent. Let me also stress something with a lot of caution. I followed the well-substantiated speech by His Eminence of Messinia. I told him it was a very well-structured presentation, very well grounded. So let me wonder, wouldn't it be nice to see as the so-called anakatharsis, that is, a cleansing of the corpus canonum, that is, to take out those canons that do not apply, are not applicable anymore, are not relevant anymore to today's reality. The codification of sacred canons is proposed by many, not just by me. In the Academy of Athens, let me inform you, since Levisatos was a member of the Academy, there is an agency of codification of sacred canons, which was never activated. Then, for 6 years, I was head of the Center for the Research of Hellenic Law of the Academy, and I talked to His All Holiness and to the then President of the Academy, Pesmazoglou, Professor Pesmazoglou, and to His Eminence of Pergamos, and told them, provided we have, of course, the organization and the resources, etc., could we try to coordinate and see what we can do with the codification? Well, nothing was done eventually. Only too often we say too much, but we do not do anything at the end of the day. Or we do too little. So let me raise another topic here. The state. Can legislate contrary to the rules of the Church? Of course it can. It certainly can. Provided, of course, the state does not oblige the faithful to apply this law if it contradicts their faith. Example. It's a typical example. And hereby I've never understood why the Church could not have helped since the beginning. Incineration of the dead. There is a law allowing the incineration of the dead. Why do we limit this only to the non-Orthodox? Is it possible for a law of the state to apply to only a specific category of citizens, only for the Orthodox in this case, and have another law for example, the Roman Catholics? No, the law should apply to everyone. The Church had the right, of course, to say, in the context of an a la carte approach, well, if you're faithful, I do not wish that you adopt incineration. You must be buried. That's talking to the faithful. Now, if one does not wish to comply, the Church has the right not to proceed to a religious Orthodox burial. This is an individual choice. Now, why is the Church now intervening in state affairs? And this, of course, has led to conflict. Let me give you another even more delicate and sensitive issue. What happens if and when the Church asks from the state to legislate, to introduce a law, despite the fact that there is a rule, a law contrary to that request? Let me explain. The redundancy of priests. When I was working with the ministry, I remember a certain religious leader was concerned that he was about to be made redundant, and he would visit me every week, and he was asking to repeal the paragraph and the article providing for the redundancy of religious leaders. Even the late Volos had written against this rule, that it is unconstitutional, it is illegal, it's unacceptable, etc. Despite that, this rule was not abolished, and it so happened the person who had expressed himself against this rule, that is Christodoulos, to implement it and himself at the end of the day. In the case of Pesenitis, the former Bishop of Athens, are you talking, is it Article 38, paragraph 8? Is it the case? Yes, when I say rule, I mean legal rule of the state. So let me rephrase. Canons do not provide for redundancy of bishops. I mean, that doesn't exist. However, the Church asked for this to be legislated. For the problem of minorities, the then Bishop of Kefalonia, it was the Church, through Seraphim, the Archbishop, asked for this provision to be introduced. So, what should the state do? The state will say, the Church, do whatever you want according to your rules. No, this is a political game. The state will do whatever the Archbishop and the Synod ask, irrespective of whether this is against the Church rules. One more thing, and I'm not criticizing anybody here, because what I'm saying is in abstracto, the Constitutional Charter of the Church. Isn't this a canonical text agreed by the state and the Church, thanks to a committee with joint participation of the clergy and the laity? How can the Church violate the Charter without sanctions? Let me give you an example. The Charter says that when the bishop's position becomes vacant, then the Archbishop, as chair of the Synod, appoints a caretaker from a neighboring metropolis. First of all, this means that the caretaker cannot be the Archbishop, but let's accept that it can be the Archbishop if he's in an adjacent metropolis. For example, if the metropolis of Paronaxia becomes vacant, Paros and Naxos, how can it be possible? How could we ever envisage that Samos came closer geographically to Paros and Naxos compared to Syros, which is next door? And what can the Bishop of Syros do? Resort to the Council of the State? Well, the time it takes for the Council of the State to rule, the position will have been filled. What I'm trying to say here is that there are many issues, there are many problems that we could and should discuss. Abuses of these rules raise a wider discussion that, of course, I cannot cover in 20 minutes. I've already received a note that I have to stick to my time. Therefore, let me just say the following. I was about to use a saying by a politician who recently said, referring to the poem by Engonopoulos, and who said, "What am I doing here in Larissa, me coming from Hydra, from the island of Hydra?" But well, it's difficult for the foreigners to understand. But so I would rather say something else that Georgios Theotokos had said, originating from where my mother originated, a brilliant spiritual man and thinker, who had said that for the Church of Greece, and this is good food for thought, he said that 60 years ago actually, that for the Church of Greece, he said, historical adaptation is still an open issue, something to be done. And he characterizes the Church as suffering from an autistic, inward-looking attitude. An autistic, inward-looking attitude. So, with these words, I would like to contribute to the discussion and take this as a provocation for more discussion in this conference, because we're talking here about laws and canons, canonical law and state law. Thank you very much.